a WikiVidi Documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Greek alphabet. The Greek alphabet has been used to write the Greek language since the late 9th or early 8th century BC. It is derived from the earlier Phoenician alphabet, and was the first alphabetic script to have distinct letters for vowels as well as consonants. In archaic and early classical times, the Greek alphabet existed in many different local variants, but, by the end of the 4th century BC, the Euclidean alphabet, with 24 letters, ordered from alpha to omega, had become standard, and it is this version that is still used to write Greek today. These 24 letters are sigma, and. The Greek alphabet is the ancestor of the Latin and Cyrillic scripts. Like Latin and Cyrillic, Greek originally had only a single form of each letter. It developed the lettercase distinction between uppercase and lowercase forms in parallel with Latin during the modern era. Sound values and conventional transcriptions for some of the letters differ between ancient and modern Greek usage, because the pronunciation of Greek has changed significantly between the 5th century BC and today. Modern and ancient Greek also use different diacritics. Apart from its use in writing the Greek language, in both its ancient and its modern forms, the Greek alphabet today also serves as a source of technical symbols and labels in many domains of mathematics, science and other fields. Sound values. In both ancient and modern Greek, the letters of the Greek alphabet have fairly stable and consistent symbol-to-sound mappings, making pronunciation of words largely predictable. Ancient Greek spelling was generally near phonemic. For a number of letters, sound values differ considerably between ancient and modern Greek, because their pronunciation has followed a set of systematic phonological shifts that affected the language in its post-classical stages. Among consonant letters, all letters that denoted voiced plosive consonants and aspirated plosives in ancient Greek stand for corresponding fricative sounds in modern Greek. The correspondences are as follows. Among the vowel symbols, modern Greek sound values reflect the radical simplification of the vowel system of post-classical Greek, merging multiple formally distinct vowel phonemes into a much smaller number. This leads to several groups of vowel letters denoting identical sounds today. Modern Greek orthography remains true to the historical spellings in most of these cases. As a consequence, the spellings of words in modern Greek are often not predictable from the pronunciation alone, while the reverse mapping, from spelling to pronunciation, is usually regular and predictable. The following vowel letters and digraphs are involved in the mergers. Modern Greek speakers typically use the same modern symbol sound mappings in reading Greek of all historical stages. In other countries, students of ancient Greek may use a variety of conventional approximations of the historical sound system in pronouncing ancient Greek. Digraphs and letter combinations. Several letter combinations have special conventional sound values different from those of their single components. Among them are several digraphs of vowel letters that formerly represented diphthongs, but are now monophthongized. In addition to the four mentioned above, there is also pronounced. The ancient Greek diphthongs, and are pronounced, and in modern Greek. In some environments, they are devoiced to, and respectively. The modern Greek consonant combinations and stand for and respectively. Stands for and stands for. In addition, both in ancient and modern Greek, the letter, before another velar consonant, stands for the velar nasal. Thus and are pronounced like English. In analogy to and, is also used to stand for. There are also the combinations and. Diacritics. In the polytonic orthography traditionally used for ancient Greek, the stressed vowel of each word carries one of three accent marks, either the acute accent, the grave accent, or the circumflex accent. These signs were originally designed to mark different forms of the phonological pitch accent in ancient Greek. By the time their use became conventional and obligatory in Greek writing, in late antiquity, pitch accent was evolving into a single stress accent, and thus the three signs have not corresponded to a phonological distinction in actual speech ever since. In addition to the accent marks, every word initial vowel must carry either of two so-called breathing marks, the rough breathing, marking and sound at the beginning of a word, or the smooth breathing, marking its absence. The letter O, although not a vowel, also carries a rough breathing in word initial position. If a rho was geminated within a word, the first always had the smooth breathing, and the second the rough breathing, leading to the transliteration RH. The vowel letters carry an additional diacritic in certain words, the so-called iota subscript, which has the shape of a small vertical stroke, or a miniature below the letter. This iota represents the former off-glide of what were originally long diphthongs, which became monophthongized during antiquity. Another diacritic used in Greek is the diaresis, indicating a hiatus. This system of diacritics was first developed by the scholar Aristophanes of Byzantium, who worked at the Museum in Alexandria during the 3rd century BC. Aristophanes of Byzantium also was the first to divide poems into lines, rather than writing them like prose, and also introduced a series of signs for textual criticism. In 1982, a new, simplified orthography, known as monotonic, was adopted for official use in modern Greek by the Greek state. It uses only a single accent mark, the acute, marking the stressed syllable of polysyllabic words, and occasionally the diaresis to distinguish diphthongal from digraph readings in pairs of vowel letters, making this monotonic system very similar to the accent mark system used in Spanish. The polytonic system is still conventionally used for writing ancient Greek, while in some book printing and generally in the usage of conservative writers it can still also be found in use for modern Greek. Although it is not a diacritic, the comma has a similar function as a silent letter in a handful of Greek words, principally distinguishing from Romanization. There are many different methods of rendering Greek text or Greek names in the Latin script. The form in which classical Greek names are conventionally rendered in English goes back to the way Greek loanwords were incorporated into Latin in antiquity. In this system, is replaced with the diphthongs, and are rendered as and respectively, and are simplified to and respectively. In modern scholarly transliteration of ancient Greek, will usually be rendered as, and the vowel combinations as respectively. The letters and are generally rendered as either or, and word initial as. For modern Greek, there are multiple different transcription conventions. They differ widely, depending on their purpose, on how close they stay to the conventional letter correspondences of ancient Greek-based transcription systems, and to what degree they attempt either an exact letter-by-letter transliteration, or rather a phonetically based transcription. Standardized formal transcription systems have been defined by the International Organization for Standardization, by the United Nations Group of Experts on Geographical Names, by the Library of Congress, and others. Origins. During the Mycenaean period, from around the 16th century to the 12th century BC, Linear B was used to write the earliest attested form of the Greek language, known as Mycenaean Greek. This writing system, unrelated to the Greek alphabet, last appeared in the 13th century BC. In the late 9th century BC or early 8th century BC, the Greek alphabet emerged. The period between the use of the two writing systems, during which no Greek texts are attested, is known as the Greek Dark Ages. The Greeks adopted the alphabet from the earlier Phoenician alphabet, one of the closely related scripts used for the West Semitic languages. However, the Phoenician alphabet is limited to consonants. When it was adopted for writing Greek, certain consonants were adapted to express vowels. The use of both vowels and consonants makes Greek the first alphabet in the narrow sense, as distinguished from the abjads used in Semitic languages, which have letters only for consonants. Greek initially took over all of the 22 letters of Phoenician. 5 were reassigned to denote vowel sounds, the glide consonants, and were used for I and U, respectively. The glottal stop consonant was used for A, the pharyngeal was turned into O, and the letter for was turned into E. A doublet of Vov was also borrowed as a consonant for W. In addition, the Phoenician letter for the emphatic glottal was borrowed in 2 different functions by different dialects of Greek, as a letter for /h/ by those dialects that had such a sound, and as an additional vowel letter for the long by those dialects that lacked the consonant. Eventually, a 7th vowel letter for the long was introduced. Greek also introduced 3 new consonant letters for its aspirated plosive sounds and consonant clusters, phi-4, chi-4 and psi-4. In Western Greek variants, chi was instead used for and psi-4. The origin of these letters is a matter of some debate. 3 of the original Phoenician letters dropped out of use before the alphabet took its classical shape, the letter, which had been in competition with sigma denoting the same phoneme /s/, the letter, which was redundant with kappa for /k/, and whose sound value /w/ dropped out of the spoken language before or during the classical period. Greek was originally written predominantly from right to left, just like Phoenician, but scribes could freely alternate between directions. For a time, a writing style with alternating right to left and left to right lines was common, until in the classical period the left to right writing direction became the norm. Individual letter shapes were mirrored depending on the writing direction of the current line. Archaic variants. There were initially numerous local variants of the Greek alphabet, which differed in the use and non-use of the additional vowel and consonant symbols and several other features. Epicuric alphabets are commonly divided into 4 major types according to their different treatments of additional consonant letters for the aspirated consonants and consonant clusters of Greek. These 4 types are often conventionally labeled as green, red, light blue, and dark blue types, based on a color-coded map in a seminal 19th century work on the topic, Studien zur Geschichte des Griechischen Alphabets by Adolf Kirchhoff. The green type is the most archaic and closest to the Phoenician. The red type is the one that was later transmitted to the West and became the ancestor of the Latin alphabet, and bears some crucial features characteristic of that later development. The blue type is the one from which the later standard Greek alphabet emerged. Athens used a local form of the light blue alphabet type until the end of the 5th century BC, which lacked the letters psi and psi as well as the vowel symbols eta and om. In the Old Attic alphabet, stood for and for, was used for all 3 sounds, and was used for all of. The letter was used for the consonant. Some variant local letter forms were also characteristic of Athenian writing, some of which were shared with the neighboring alphabet of Euboea, a form of that resembled a Latin L and a form of that resembled a Latin S. The classical 24-letter alphabet that is now used to represent the Greek language was originally the local alphabet of Ionia. By the late 5th century BC, it was commonly used by many Athenians. In 403 BC, at the suggestion of the Archaics, the Athenian assembly formally abandoned the Old Attic alphabet and adopted the Ionian alphabet as part of the democratic reforms after the overthrow of the 30 tyrants. Because of Euclides' role in suggesting the idea to adopt the Ionian alphabet, the standard 24-letter Greek alphabet is sometimes known as the Euclidean alphabet. Roughly 30 years later, the Euclidean alphabet was adopted in Boeotia, and it may have been adopted a few years previously in Macedonia. By the end of the 4th century BC, it had displaced local alphabets across the Greek-speaking world to become the standard form of the Greek alphabet. Letter names. When the Greeks adapted the Phoenician alphabet, they took over not only the letter shapes and sound values, but also the names by which the sequence of the alphabet could be recited and memorized. In Phoenician, each letter name was a word that began with the sound represented by that letter. Thus Aleph, the word for ox, was used as the name for the glottal stop, bet, or house, for the sound, and so on. When the letters were adopted by the Greeks, most of the Phoenician names were maintained or modified slightly to fit Greek phonology. Thus, Aleph, bet, Gimel became Alpha, Beta, Gamma. The Greek names of the following letters are more or less straightforward continuations of their Phoenician antecedents. Between ancient and modern Greek, they have remained largely unchanged, except that their pronunciation has followed regular sound changes along with other words. The name of lambda is attested in early sources as besides. In modern Greek the spelling is often reflecting pronunciation. Similarly, iota is sometimes spelled in modern Greek. In the tables below, the Greek names of all letters are given in their traditional polytonic spelling. In modern practice, like with all other words, they are usually spelled in the simplified monotonic system. In the cases of the 3 historical sibilant letters below, The correspondence between Phoenician and Ancient Greek is less clear, with apparent mismatches both in letter names and sound values. The early history of these letters has been a matter of some debate. Here too, the changes in the pronunciation of the letter names between ancient and modern Greek are regular. In the following group of consonant letters, the older forms of the names in ancient Greek were spelled with, indicating an original pronunciation with e. In modern Greek these names are spelled with. The following group of vowel letters were originally called simply by their sound values as long vowels, e, o, u, and. Their modern names contain adjectival qualifiers that were added during the Byzantine period to distinguish between letters that had become confusable. Thus, the letters and, pronounced identically by this time, were called omicron and omega respectively. The letter was called epsilon to distinguish it from the identically pronounced digraph, while, similarly, which at this time was pronounced, was called ypsilon to distinguish it from the identically pronounced digraph. Some dialects of the Aegean and Cypriot have retained long consonants and pronounce and. Also, has come to be pronounced in Cypriot. Letter shapes. Like Latin and other alphabetic scripts, Greek originally had only a single form of each letter, without a distinction between uppercase and lowercase. This distinction is an innovation of the modern era, drawing on different lines of development of the letter shapes in earlier handwriting. The oldest forms of the letters in antiquity are majuscule forms. Besides the upright, straight inscriptional forms found in stone carvings or incised pottery, more fluent writing styles adapted for handwriting on soft materials were also developed during antiquity. Such handwriting has been preserved especially from papyrus manuscripts in Egypt since the Hellenistic period. Ancient handwriting developed two distinct styles: uncial writing, with carefully drawn, rounded block letters of about equal size, used as a bookhand for carefully produced literary and religious manuscripts, and cursive writing, used for everyday purposes. The cursive forms approached the style of lowercase letter forms, with ascenders and descenders, as well as many connecting lines and ligatures between letters. In the 9th and 10th century, uncial bookhands were replaced with a new, more compact writing style, with letter forms partly adapted from the earlier cursive. This minuscule style remained the dominant form of handwritten Greek into the modern era. During the Renaissance, Western printers adopted the minuscule letter forms as lowercase printed typefaces, while modeling uppercase letters on the ancient inscriptional forms. The orthographic practice of using the letter case distinction for marking proper names, titles etc. developed in parallel to the practice in Latin and other Western languages. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?